Hello everyone, thanks for joining us for another edition of Texas Insider TV, brought to you by the Texas Alliance of Energy Producers. I'm Jim Cardle. Well, the stock markets increased 31% in Donald Trump's first year as president, the highest since FDR. Business confidence in small business is growing at record rates. And what is the raw intersection between politics and our U.S. economy at the moment? We're pleased to be able to visit with Texas Insider guest Marc Flaster, who's a bank consultant and an analyst, to break down what's exactly going on in the Texas economy right now. Well, Marc Flaster from Wall Street and the New York Financial District, appreciate you taking the time out of your visit here to Texas to join us today.
It was always my pleasure, and I look forward to it.
Well, we were talking here just a second ago before going on air about the strength in this economy, and I just want to be respectful of your time and let you get back on the road because I know you got some meetings this afternoon. But this nexus of politics and the economy and the rebounding and the strength of the economy, give us your kind of 30,000 foot view, if you can, Marc, about unemployment numbers or employment numbers coming out the other day, home sales going through the roof. Is this economy going to have a new name, not the Trump bump, but something else because it's of its strength, or what's your analysis?
Well, the first thing I have to say is that the leadership of thought is in our newspapers and the dynamic, or newspapers and the press. Use the word press. Could be TV set, could be newspaper. And unfortunately, they are so far to the left that they spend all their time on the liberal limit and discouraging thoughts that would indicate things are getting better. And so what they do is emphasize the things that are not, or the areas where there is little support. And so you don't see the positives that come out. The biggest positive that came out of our election is not so much the personality of Donald Trump. It was the shift of emphasis that is completely being avoided, and because they're spending all time with his thought process and the like. But that shift of emphasis is actually reduced the effort in the prior 8 to 10 years to support a group of people, that a very large section of our economy, that were not contributing and were users. Now, nothing says that these are wonderful people and they have a right to everything they can get, but they're contributing less than they're taking. And what the current administration is trying to do, and is successfully doing, successfully doing, is de-emphasizing that focus. And some of it has to do with not employing some of the rules that have been passed by the Congress, some of it by actually being able to undo some of those things altogether, or not fund them, put it that way, and allowing the other elements that were prospering or were going forward to not only go forward, but also to challenge the ideas that are in the forefront today that will say whether this could happen. And I mentioned to you earlier on a little conversation that you have companies today that hire people with no skill. And they come to work and they're paid very well, and they sit in an atmosphere where basically they're to think up something and experience what's going on, and they give me some new ideas, something challenging, something new that we haven't thought about that could be an area that could help us expand our business. And some people in that area come up with something and they stick around, and the ones that don't, they go off someplace else, and they may end up in another place that they can prosper in, and they may not. But the point is, the old staircase that we had of starting at the bottom and learning the skills and how a company worked, and then moving up slowly to got a position of, we'll say, respect and responsibility, however that one came first or second, and we don't have that anymore. And we're starting people at much higher salaries, so we're telling people that you're valuable to me because there's something that you're going to be able to bring this company. It's worth an awful lot, and we're all going to prosper from it. But if I don't see it, if I don't get it, if you don't bring it to me, if you don't find it, that's okay. That's okay. I paid you for the effort, and we'll find somebody else.
So I kind of hear you're saying that a whole new window. We've talked before about the technological impacts of industrial growth, but you're talking more about, I think, what's perhaps been reflected in the small business confidence index hitting all times high. We're creating things out of nothing essentially, and it's leading to a strong economic boom right
Well,
now.
take for example, just the fact that when we thought of ourselves as a factory-orientated economy, then we brought people in to manage to operate a machine, and then we upgraded that machine. The gears got easier to move one thing or another. There was some new technology that came in that made that machine faster, more efficient. Well, now the machine doesn't need you anymore. The machine operates on itself. We got one person that monitors 10 machines instead of 10 people on one machine or something like that. And in some cases, we've gone and outsourced the whole machinery process of development and manufacturing, and now we're just in the sales and distribution side of the business. So part of that business is no longer in our confine, which means that we don't have the factory. So we find that factory areas are being closed down, and they're turning out to be residential areas as they begin to get developed. A whole different idea of how I develop the thought process of my company, and I'm looking for people now who can improve how we do things, not how we get things done.
I want to expand on that a little bit. And first, folks, thank you for tuning in for this edition of Texas Insider TV, brought to you by the Texas Alliance of Energy Producers. We're visiting with bank consultant and advisor Marc Flaster from New York City. Marc, you had a column earlier this week that was entitled, the phrase uncharted waters is more applicable now than it's ever been. And I know in previous conversations we've had, you've talked about how the younger generation, perhaps 35 and younger, not acquiring assets, not starting families, not purchasing homes as much as experiencing life. Is that kind of what or talk about the impacts of that, because I think it's what you're indirectly referring to, that is a fresh concept for many economists.
Well, again, so much of our view of things is to look at the past and then try to answer or identify what was moving that or what's influencing
project it forward,
and take that forward as if it's something it's a stepping stone or it's cumulative. And what's happened here in these last years, it has to do an awful lot with information available. If we were to be sitting in a bus or just standing on the street corner today, I would say 90% would have some kind of machinery in their ears, listening to either music or a speech or who knows what they're doing, but they are involved in themselves and in their own special moment. They're in their own sphere. And so you've had a development of a whole element of educational experience that is more individualized and self-promoted. And so when you bring that to your company and you say, I'm going to hire a bunch of people, and I go out and I don't know who they are, and I have no experience with them in the past, but I'm going to put them in my organization. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, I want you to look around and sit here a while. Cross your feet, cross your hands, cross your eyes, whatever you want to do. And then come to me, or just do something that you see that can contribute, that you thought up that would make things better or work, not just better, but work, or maybe it's a whole new idea. But I didn't bring it to you and say, here's the chart, here's the parts that put this thing together, and assemble this, and then I'll give you another one. Okay, I asked you to really just go in another direction, somewhere I've never been. And it doesn't mean that my company's not doing well. It's just there's things out there that I don't know about, and I'm not going to know about because my thinking is not in that direction. But I'm bringing you in because I'm hoping that you have not constrained by things I'm constrained by, and that's going to help my company. And we see that happening all the time. We see companies that are entering into fields that no one ever believed that there was a place you could make any money.
I know in your column you mentioned Austin Company Home Away, or the home rental type thing. Some of maybe the pet shipping companies, these new things, as you're referring to, that nobody had an idea of before, just springing up left and right. And I guess partially driving the stock market, correct?
Well, it drives the stock market because the stock market was built years ago on value within a constraint, and it said it was this time's earnings. So we said if you took all the companies that were in, let's say, the Dow, and we put that aside for 30 companies, and said those companies can trade at 15 times earnings, pick a number, and we'll say if their earnings grow at 3 to 4%, then that would be the growth of the stock. Well, now what we find is these companies have branched into areas that we never knew nothing about. We don't know what the valuation is, and we've seen a stock market that's gone to 25,000, and the reference of what those mathematics represent, in my opinion, no longer applicable. I think the stock market could be 10. That could be 100,000. It's just an index that represents the amount of activity and the growth of the industries in which the companies represent. And they're growing at a very rapid rate, much faster than our old school had of a very plotted, scheduled recognition of profit and loss capability. We have companies now that don't make any money and trade at substantial premiums. But what the market is looking into them is that they are forecasting something that could be very big. Mm-hmm. Now it may not. It may not. But the markets, the investors today are willing to make that bet. And so that's completely different than valuation of times earnings.
Let's talk about the stock market a little bit, because since you were in it last, we had what many analysts are saying is a correction, a substantial week or two drop. And then some employment numbers came out, some earnings reports, the Federal Reserve Board's got a new chairman. But how about in perspective of both the bond market and the stock market's intersection with the Trump administration? We've had a recent dismissal of Secretary Cohn on the tariff economic front, Secretary of State Tillerson as well. How's the mentality of the markets and of Wall Street looking at the Trump administration right now?
I'm going to say I don't think I'm qualified to answer that question. all I would say is that what the Trump administration has demonstrated is that just because you have the job doesn't mean that you're the man to have the job. And so he's got a particular view of the people that he wants around him. In the beginning, I think he selected people that came from an area where they had some credibility and accomplishment. He brought them into his organization. Personality-wise, it didn't work well with him. And he said, this is what I want to do, you're not supporting me. I said, I can't have you in my company and not support me. But I ask you to think about, or anyone watching this to think about that this is a gentleman who is not a politician. He's a businessman. He runs a business. He's running our country as if it's a business, I believe, and that's why there's a lot of changeover now for many people. There's always people who encourage things, one way or the other, and say, well, he's not doing the right thing for me. But so far, the economy is prospering, and one of the things I think he's brought to fore is that there's a lot of discord in the world, number one, and number two, you can't be all things to all people, and number three, a number of our, let's say, our nations that we support are moving in a direction that is different than where he would like us to be. Mm-hmm. And so he's moving to either threaten them that he's going to leave, which he's done with this new idea. He said, well, we're going to impose restraints, but for Canada and Mexico, we're going to take those aside. Today, what he put another Australia. Put Australia in the same box. And so little by little, he's saying, if you want to do business with the U.S. government, and we represent a very big piece of the world's GDP, you have to do things that help us. And here's the outline, either come along and be with us. If you're not, then you're going to have to overcome the constraints I'm putting in position or move in another direction.
Yeah. One final question again, folks. Thanks for joining us today for this visit with bank analyst and Texas bank consultant Marc Flaster. Marc, if I can, before letting you go, let's drill down into the Texas economy. You have been doing this for decades, not to date you, but have your pulse on the Texas economy via the Texas banking industry. You've helped bring numerous Texas banks public. What's your read on the Texas economy right now, per se? We all assume that it's going well, we feel that it's going well, but comparatively, give us some perspective on the Texas economy.
I think the answer is very clear. Texas is booming, not just going well, it's booming. It's booming. The terribly, let's say, focused states on human element and human rights and providing lots of services has taxed those states to a point that they run huge budget deficits. I'm a Connecticut resident and hoping that to leave because I just can't afford to continue to live there in an element where they look to me as a resource to pay for all the things that I don't agree with. And
there's been some other stories about more relocations from California to Texas recently.
And the same from California to come here. Texas has a lot of opportunity here. There's a dynamic in the state of people who feel that they are capable of contributing. They look to be more part of the equation rather than be along as part of the ride of the equation, and that's led to tremendous development. One of the interesting things I give you is what happened with the hurricanes in Houston versus New Orleans. 40% of the population of southern Louisiana left. A lot of them came to Texas.
Really?
Nobody in Texas left. Mm-hmm. They rebuilt.
Mm-hmm. We can do it.
Yeah.
Attitude, independence.
Right.
Gotcha. Okay, well, I'm going to take that as that we're not only lucky, but it's going to continue here in the Texas economy.
I believe so, and I believe it's spreading. I think the communities are spreading. The Dallas-Fort Worth area is becoming more DFW. I mean, mm-hmm. You connect them all with hyphens. The outlying areas that we might call suburban, were suburban, are now suburban, and they're moving closer. The cultural activities are being more centered, and people are attracted to that. They see we've seen more residential towers rather than hotels.
Absolutely.
We see people who want to live closer to the culture. They want to live closer to where things are more convenient, and they're willing to give up backyards and
their lawnmowers.
The lawnmowers, yeah, lawnmowers, which are another problem.
Well, speaking of convenient, we're going to put a plug in the jug and let you get on your way. Marc Flaster from Wall Street and Texas Bank Consultant, we appreciate you coming in today.
It's always my pleasure, and I always look forward to it. And I spent a lot of time traveling to Texas, and each time I come here, I say to myself, what a wonderful place.
Well, appreciate that. We appreciate your wonderful comments and insight as well. Hope you'll come back.
Thank you again.
Folks, we appreciate you joining us for this edition of Texas Insider Television. Hope you also will come back and join us for future editions, because remember, you're either an insider or you're not. I'm Jim Cardle. Thanks for joining us.
Okay.